Like me, you may have enjoyed the series of comedy films The Naked Gun, starring Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin, a clumsy and incompetent American police officer who, when faced with criminal masterminds attempting to take over the world, somehow manages to save the day. The characters in Naked Gun first appeared in a short-lived TV show called Police Squad, which unbelievably was cancelled after only 6 episodes because the ABC network in America thought that the viewers were unable to cope with the pace of its visual humour and quick-fire jokes. One of these jokes was at the beginning of every episode when a special guest star was introduced and then immediately killed off before the credits had even finished rolling. This is the fate of all the male characters in the first chapter of Ruth. In the first few verses, we are introduced to the family of Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. By verse 5, before the opening credits are even finished rolling, as it were, all the men in the family have been killed off. This leaves Naomi alone, in a strange place and in a precarious position. She and the family have fled from Bethlehem in the midst of a famine. Ironically, Bethlehem means house of bread or house of food. She is thus the widow of someone who has deserted his clan in favour of a trip to Moab and has now lost her sons, which in ancient Israel would have been taken as a clear sign of God's wrath. So, having removed all of the prerequisites for social acceptance, stability and security, men, the story now introduces in verse 6 an all-female cast. Naomi is still in search of food and sets off home, and then is joined by her 2 daughters-in-law. She tries her best to turn them away. Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. There is undoubtedly kindness and love in Naomi's blessing of Ruth and Orpah. Some commentators have pointed out that she may well have another motive, though. If these Moabite women turn up in Judah with her, it will be blindingly obvious that her sons have intermarried. That was shameful enough in itself, but to Moabites, who were cursed in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 3 to 4. No Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even the 10th generation. For they did not come to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt. Moab was rich in grain, which presumably why Naomi's family had sought food there in the first place, why their refusal to feed the Israelites during the Exodus was especially heinous. At first, neither daughter-in-law is keen to leave their mother-in-law, the matriarch of their husband's family. But eventually, Orpah agrees to. Ruth, on the other hand, is going nowhere. We get a couple of clues here, I think, as to the probability that Naomi feels a long way from the God of Israel. Verse 13, she says, "It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." In verse 15, she urges Ruth to follow Orpah. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." There is no attempt here on the part of Naomi to assert to Ruth that the God of Israel is the one true God. What follows from Ruth, I think, is one of the most stirring declarations in Scripture. Verse 16, Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." Ruth, a Gentile, here is expressing not only her devotion to her mother-in-law, but demonstrating at this point more faith and trust in Naomi's God than Naomi can muster herself. Naomi's remoteness from God continues when she arrives back in Bethlehem. In verse 20, she tells those who greet her, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full. The Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." In fact, although her stomach and her marriage bed may now be empty, Naomi has actually received great provision from God. As the final verse in the chapter says, "So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning."